Excited to be here and to share all of these very unique and powerful voices. This is a really important conversation for us to be having, more so now than ever before. And you've got some of the most brilliant minds in the country in this room right now, in the Zoom room. So please, if you have questions, I'm really great at monitoring chat and making sure that we are having an open dialogue and that you're having your questions answered, right? We know this stuff. We've been in this world a long time, but we want to make sure that whatever the questions are that you have about venture, about investing, about what Femtech is, about any of these things, you let us know so we can make sure that you walk away from this with really actionable steps, a little bit of education, and maybe even some fun. Cool? All right, so with that, I'll give a brief intro and then I'll pass it along to the rest of the panelists. I'm Laurel Mintz. I am the GP of Fabric VC. We're a $10 million US seed fund investing only with a diversity lens, which means we only invest in queer, BIPOC, and female-led consumer brands. This was my personal kind of rollout from a prior agency that I ran for 15 years. We worked in the same space, and I've been lucky to be an LP in multiple funds, and I know very clearly that this is how we as women and as minorities can and will create a brighter future. So if I kind of rolled this out and was like, if not me, who? If not now, when? Didn't exactly know what I was getting myself into. Now I know better, just kidding. And it's been a wild ride, but so much fun. And I will pass it along to Rachael.
Hi everyone, Rachael Kim. I am the founder and CEO of the Femtech Salon. We are a pre-accelerator and community event series focused on amplifying Femtech founders. So if Femtech is really any company that's focused on, I would say, areas, conditions, any kind of health diseases that disproportionately affect women and non-binary, as well as I would say underrepresented individuals. And so that's everything from like digital health to like CPG, beauty and wellness. It's very broad. It's a $1 trillion industry, so there's money to be made. So, you know, as much as we talk about diversity, there's money here. It's not just, you know, we're not a community project. It's very much, there's business sense as well as I would say a humanitarian sense to what we're doing. So a little bit about us.
Yeah. We're going to talk about that for sure, because it's a big part of this conversation, which is if the job of all these men, frankly, at the top is to make money, and this is a great business investment, and they're still not investing in it, what does that tell us, right? I'm going to leave it at that for a quick second. Jessica, share with us a little bit about your story.
Yeah, well, the story is long, so I'll keep it short. Jessica Salinas, New Media Ventures. We're an early stage impact investment fund that has a thesis of power building, so progressive power building. And we invest in the areas of media and civic technology, and we make grants to advocacy organizations. But prior to this, I was at Headspace, which is a little tech company here in Santa Monica that focuses on, right, tiny little mindfulness meditation company, focuses on the health and happiness of everyone. And I was part of the founding B2B team there, as well as led the creation of the social impact team there, which I would say is like my big win while I was there. And I also was kind of the first employee at the Stanford Latino Entrepreneurship Initiative, co-authored the first national research report on the state of U.S. Latino entrepreneurship, as well as developed the accelerator program that has now graduated over 700 Latino entrepreneurs from across the United States and has helped them scale their businesses. But I actually started my career in education. So K through 12 education in East Palo Alto, serving Black and Brown students. And that will forever be a cherished memory of mine. And I'm from Texas. So I always have to mention that, from a big Mexican family. Happy to be here.
Happy to have you. Next up, we have IIiana.
Yes, thank you, Laurel, and thank you for the invitation to be here. Happy to see you all. IIiana Quinonez. I'm a little bit different. I'm a startup advisor, so I'm on the other side, helping our entrepreneurs and startup founders. My specialty is women, underrepresented minorities, and Latino founders. So Jessica, also, I relate to you because I also come from a Mexican family. I'm originally from Mexico City, based here in San Francisco. And the other thing is, I've been in the high-tech industry for many, many years. I've been an IT executive leader. So my specialty is in deep tech, fintech, ed tech. Happy to be here, happy to talk about the challenges that the industry faces. Myself, I have been at the startups, actually. The biggest one was a great IPO back in the early 2000s with BEA systems. So that was a great exit. But I have also been at the startups with founding teams that have had to pivot many times. So happy to share that experience. And there's a lot of lessons learned, but to Rachel's point, there's also a lot of money to be made. So there's the opportunities out there for everyone. Thank you.
I love it. There's already the Mexico City connection. I'm actually going to Mexico City for my second time at the end of the year to go visit Pujol, which is one of the top restaurants in the world. If you haven't heard of it, it's supposed to be incredible. I'm very excited. And last but certainly not least, my dear friend Adela, who we met doing a Women in Governance program at UCLA Anderson. So I've known her a long time, and aside from fantastic hair, has a great initiative.
Yes, Laurel and I go way back, way before venture. Great to be here with everybody. Adela, Jamal, GP and co-founder of Milemark Capital. So we are a fund out of Boston. We focus on diverse founders. So of course, a very big, soft spot for also female founders and AI-led companies. Prior to launching Milemark, my background spans from running a startup, working for a VC in the Bay Area, which is sort of where I started the whole sort of entrepreneurial journey. And then I made my way over to corporate, working for Sony Pictures for 7 years here in Los Angeles. So I've done a little bit of everything, but I would say as a sort of undercurrent to all of it has been supporting underrepresented groups. And being from India originally, it's something that I've just been very hyper aware of, what it means to sort of live outside the lines and what that career path looks like for you sort of as you're getting started, but also later on and what you can do about it. So, supporting the community and also giving back. So really excited to be here. And thanks, Mario, for bringing us together.
Yes, thank you, Mario. And Anthony, we're able to join us. Welcome. Tell us your story.
Yes, I'm glad the Zoom link is working, but Anthony Heckman, I'm on the founding team at unitQ in sales there. We've been running the company now for about 5 years, growing it from 4 to close to 80 people. And it's been an amazing experience. We have incredible investors like Google and Excel, some of the best customers in the world, like Pinterest, Chime, Spotify, PayPal. So we've been doing that for about the last 5 years. Before that, I was an early stage venture doing pre-seed, seed, Series A. And seemingly like most of the folks on this call, I'm a massive fan of Mexico City and the food and the culture. So would love to open unitQ's Mexico City office. I talk about it every week.
Yes,
we'll see. But yeah, really excited to be here and share and be helpful. So thanks for having me.
Thank you for being here, everyone. Again, as a reminder, for those of you that are just tuning in, please ask your questions in the chat. I think they were having some QA technical issues, so make sure you put your questions in the chat and I'll make sure to incorporate them as we go through this conversation, because we've been doing this a while. Actually, I think I'm the youngest one on this board. Adela, maybe you were right. You and I started right around the same time, it feels like, but there's a lot of education and empowerment in this room. So make sure you ask your questions so that you can walk away from this with what you need to be successful in your careers. So let's get into it. And I'm just going to start with one of the most obvious questions, which is, why have diverse founders historically not received the funding and support that we all know in this room that they need? But for some reason, the powers that be, as we call it, the pale, male, and stale of the world, still don't get it. Why do we think that is? And I'm just going to call a random. Anthony, it seemed like that got you a little giggling. So I'm going to start with you.
Yeah, the pale, male, and stale. I've heard a lot, but I haven't heard that.
I'm in for marketing after all,
I love it.
Start
yeah,
there.
No, it's, unfortunately, like so many things, venture is a lot about relationships and network, right? And people invest in, particularly at the early stage, like people that they know and trust, and it happens to be the same people over and over again, right? They knew someone who was successful in sector X, and so they're going to put more money from someone who also went to schools ABC, and they also ski, and they also go to vacation and whatever, right? They can identify with that person. I think that's a huge part of the problem. Investors, at least many of them, spend a lot of time talking about how much they love taking risk. But having been now in the Bay Area for 13 years, I've seen so many people actually don't like taking risks. They want to take as little risk as possible. We need to hold folks more accountable, right? If they're going to talk about all the incredible stuff that they're going to do for underrepresented founders, like let's make sure that they're actually putting their money where their mouth is, or don't say anything. I say that.
So it sounds like it's a good old boys club, which we all know in this room is absolutely true. And Rachel, it seemed like you maybe had some stats to back that up.
For me, it's really about stats. So everything is data driven. If you've ever read the book Invisible Women, it's the lack of stats. And therefore, whenever, let's say, a non-male pale stale individual would be put in a room, there weren't stats for them to support their position. It was more of, oh, that's what you feel. That's not reality. And it's really through data. And I come from a data background. I worked for Accenture, did their data strategy, was their GDPR person, but I really helped Fortune 100s understand like business and data is super important. And now we know, right, with the rise of AI, but the lack of data has up until recently, particularly for the Femtech area. So if you think of anything before 1993, 96, it was all tested on white cisgendered males. And so when you talk about any kind of medical treatment, any kind of product, or even an example of is that pink glove investment, where they didn't talk to any of the consumers to understand what if there was necessary. It really just shows that I would say there's a enabled part of the population that has dictated the area, but there's also been a lack of information and research and data. Now that's shifting, particularly in Femtech, because brands are willing to invest in their own research, to work with the FDA to do the clinical trials, because they can't wait on the government to fund it anymore. So I think we see that shift, but for me, it's really the lack of data to demonstrate the real disparity from a Femtech point of view, but even from a gender point of view. I mean, Gina Davis's organization as well showed that in Hollywood, right? But took data to be able to fight what I would say the existing systems are. And that's really where Femtech Salon comes in, because my hypothesis is about the current ecosystem within the healthcare space is not conducive for women and non-binary individual founders to be successful. And
I
so
totally
to
agree
change,
with that.
yeah, and to change that is really, I'm catalyzing, and we've seen this through our events, you build the community around them to catalyze what they're doing to create that foundation. Because that's, to going to Anthony's point, a lot of these people already had that foundation. They were born with that foundation, or they had connections to create that. If you look at, I would say, diverse founders, women founders, a lot of them come from nothing, right? They have to build that foundation. And so using community to collectively build that has been, I would say, one step towards success for us and why we exist. And now I'm building a pre-accelerator.
I love that you're focused on Femtech, because it is, if there's anything broken in the male body, you can believe that there's stats and trials and medicine and anything you could think of. And it's just not the case in your world. Jessica, you wanted to add something?
Yeah, not to be pessimist, but I also think it's about conserving power, right? I think the reasons there has been so much resistance to embracing data, even when it's in the best interest of companies and investors, is because it is about ultimately conservation of power, and the power we know it has historically lied has been with pale, male, and stale, right? White men in this country. And I think the reason I also feel strongly in that way is, one, because of the space that I live in, which is the progressive space, investing in progressive entrepreneurs, but also, in 2015, we released the first State of U.S. Latino Entrepreneurship report. I co-authored that report, and it was with that lens of, if we can just show that it is important to invest in Latino entrepreneurs, that it's actually an economic imperative, right? It's good for the economy, then they'll have no option but to fund us, right? That's 2015. That was 8 years ago now. And we showed that had Latino-owned businesses scaled within, this 5-year period, it would have added $1.2 trillion to like the US economy. And every year there's been another report that says the same thing, that has the data. Where, like, I was just speaking at a conference last week, the Social Innovation Summit here in LA, in front of thousands of people, kind of screaming data on how we're resilient, et cetera. And what we're seeing in the VC space right now, and Anthony, you'll know this, is that, and it goes to your point around risk, is that right now, as VC market is facing unprecedented times or turbulent times, the dollars where they're slowing down isn't in white founders, it's in Black, brown, BIPOC founders, again, because they're going back to the risk that they know, they're going back to the conservation. So although I'm optimistic that data will help, I'm also a little bit on the realistic side, just having, been screaming from the top of my lungs for the past 8 years.
Well, yeah, and we've been all screaming for a long time. And the frank truth is that it's been backsliding, especially over the pandemic when people got nervous. We were the ones that lost out over time. So I don't think it's pessimistic. I think this is unfortunately the reality that we all face and why it's so vital that we have all of these conversations. And the last thing I'll say is that, like, let's call it as it is. This is institutionalized racism, institutionalized genderism, whatever you want to call it. All the isms are applicable here. And that's why we frankly don't get the dollars, period, full stop. I don't know if I can curse on this. I'm usually a potty mouth, so I apologize if I do that.
And I'm going to be also on this, where it's also, if you do have power, there's also great opportunity. So not everybody loses in this kind of market. People win. They make a lot of money. If you look at 2008, they do. But what they do, like massive M&As, right? They get cheaper deals. And so it's not because if people aren't investing, they're also trying to get the best deal. Right? It's not about the amount that they invest as well. So I just want to throw that out there because for me, it reminds me 2008 market era, and people made money. People lost, but other people win. And so that's definitely something to point out.
Adela, it looked like you unmuted and wanted to add something.
Yeah. I mean, I love what everyone's sharing because I think it's spot on. And I think, just layering on to the power, the capitalism, I think it's also about timing, right? So if you think about from a venture side, venture is young or old, depending on sort of where you are situated in the country, in the world. But in most hubs, it's actually pretty new, which is good because I think for what we're addressing, you actually do sort of need that new guard, right? So when we think about venture, number of decades, think about who had the capital to start those funds. And so as much as they want to talk about, just like the hype and support DEI, they're probably not really set up for it, right? So you think about the leadership team and sort of where their numbers have been, it's really not in anything that we're addressing here. And so when you look at the time horizon for funds, they're set up typically 7 to 10 years. So you really have to factor that into, well, who's running the fund, right? Who are they looking for? What does their data show them, right? How are they convincing themselves? And then what does that new generation look like? So I think what's really exciting here, maybe more positive twist here is, this is the new face of venture. Right? This is the new face of accelerators, pre-accelerators, like love everything that we're doing here. And this is going to be that next wave that we see. It's just so frustrating. I think that's what we're harping on, is it's so frustrating because we're not seeing the change happen as fast as it should.
Yeah, the old guard still has power. IIiana, it looked like you wanted to add something as well.
Yes, I'm actually so happy, Adela, that you brought the positive side of it, because this is the new phase. One thing that I can use as an analogy, right? When you think about women in STEM, right, it took a long time to also build that foundation. So I compare that to how we're doing in the entrepreneurial system right now for underrepresented minorities. But one thing that if we focus on the VC side, and that's it, the money side, and that's very important, right? But on the other hand, if we focus also on the credibility and the visibility, right? We need trailblazers. We need to bring stages and set the platform for visibility for those entrepreneurs that have been successful, because there's the stories out there. Right. And sometimes it's the typical problem of lack of representation, and representation matters, right, in any industry. And this is not the exception. So I would like to say that bringing that knowledge, that awareness, and also leaning in on each other. Because here's the thing, when I hear a lot about the VCs, and I hear it from a lot of founders, right, where are you going to go and raise money from? And this is the big VCs, and this is the people that everybody's talking about. And I'm like, well, but who is the best alignment for you and your company, right, and your community and the customers you're trying to reach? And I think that's a little bit of lack of awareness sometimes on the part of the startup founders, to say, you know what, if we are talking about underrepresented minority founders, Latin founders, and all that, who are those VCs that are focused, that have actually dedicated, allocated funds to these type of organizations, these type of new companies? So I think sometimes, again, it's a matter of lack of representation, having those high visibility stories of success, and then having the ecosystem to support each other with people that are focused on solving the same problem on both the VC side, but also the startup founder side too.
I couldn't agree with that more. And that was really one of the main start questions we had here was, how do we fix that? Like, what is the next part of that conversation go to? And IIiana, I'm going to stick with you, since you consult so many of these founders. what are some of the steps that founders can take and VCs need to be paying attention to, other than those like us who are clearly so focused on investing with a diversity lens?
Yep, no, absolutely, Laurel. I think on the startup founder side, I would say two things, right? One is know who you can be aligned with. So who's aligned to you, your philosophy, your community, and in general, who wants to create a better ecosystem, right, of these kind of founders. So, and go to them, because those are the ones that are going to be more receptive to your ideas. Just because you're a startup founder, that's an underrepresented minority too. And that's their thesis, right? That's what they are focused on. So
do you have a specific list, like a group that you can point people to? Like, let's give them some real resources so that if someone's listening in who's a VC or who's a founder, like, what are your favorite resources for this? Let's get actionable.
Great question, Laurel, and I love the fact that you asked that question. So obviously, I'm very focused on the Hispanic communities, on the Latinx community. So I can say Latinx VCs, for instance. Latitude Ventures is another one. Chingona Ventures, very focused on women, as well as AgTech and several other areas. Accelerators like the ones that I represent, that I work with, Manos Accelerator, which is funded by the Google Launchpad, the ICA fund here in San Francisco, that's focused also on all different kinds of industries, great accelerator program, but also have funding resources for the companies that graduate from the accelerator. And if you're in a scale mode, then they also have funds for that, even if you're not part of the accelerator. So that's just to say some names out there, but there's plenty of others as well. Angel networks, that one I would like to call out for all of those of you who are Latin, Hispanic, the Angel Network, Angel Investors, Angeles Investors for those in Spanish. So that's also a great angel network, right? And and just to go back to your side, Laurel, in terms of the VCs, really it's about a couple of things, right? One is understanding that there is some bias, to your point of systemic biases there. So deconstructing the bias you have in building that talent pipeline of the startup founders is super important. Allocating funds, dedicated funds to these communities is another super important thing. And the other one I would say is investors' education. There's a ton of people out there, especially right now in high tech, a ton of people out there with money who would love to be part of this ecosystem, and they just don't know how to be honest with you. They would love to be
that's
angel
100%
investors,
right.
And they don't know how to even connect with the startups. They don't even understand what an accelerator does, or they don't even understand VCs. What do I need to become an LP, a GP? So I think there's a lot of education that we still need to do on those sides. And it's a point in time right now that we can leverage that. So it's even a business opportunity, I would call it out.
Totally. And I think to Adela's point, like this is the next wave. So it is actually our responsibility to educate and empower. And that's what I have found I've had a couple hundred conversations with prospective LPs, and half of my time is spent on education and empowerment. And now I've actually shifted the conversation to say, like, look, whether you invest or not, my job, my gift is to make sure that you understand why this is such a valuable and important asset class that's going to change the world if you choose to invest in it. So take it or leave it, but at least you need to know what this means and how it's going to help us change the world. What other resources would anyone on the panel like to offer? Let's get real with resources. What other channels, LinkedIn groups, like what can we share with our audience? Adela, looks like you unmuted.
Yeah, I can share. So I love what IIiana was kind of putting out there for maybe certain groups as well. I think, I just actually spoke to Nilima, who does work with the Female Founders Lab, and she's based in LA, I believe, going to Austin. And that's just an example of a platform, right? But she's also got like a list in there. So once you join the community, which is free, then you get access to angel investor lists. You can talk about different sectors. But similarly, let's talk about LA. There's the Women Founders Network, right? Great source of connections, mentors, advisors, just a very
happy to sit on the board, as you know.
Yeah, Laurel is there. I wasn't trying to do a tee up, but it is perfect. It's a case in point. You just got really great resources who can be there in person if you'd like to get that like in-person time. But then you've also got the virtual platforms. And if you even do a very quick search based on, whatever city that you're in, there are a number of angel groups. So in California, there are angel groups almost for every single, major city, major hub. And those are usually really open individuals who want to make a difference. And so even if they are not going to be the direct person who's investing in you, they might actually be a great introduction. And that's what it's about. Have that network, work for you.
Absolutely. Anyone else have any other networks or resource pages to share?
So I'll hop in for more of the, I would say, the health perspective. My goal is to make LA the Femtech Center for the US. So we have really great organizations here, like the Bioscience LA, we have Cedars-Sinai, City of Hope, Femtech Salon. I'm going to put a plug in here because we are filling in a gap. But those I would say are great starting ones for more, and then women in bioscience. So women in bio. So more of the bioscience, life science perspective. There's also amazing beauty and wellness. So Willow Growth is a VC that's well known, but they also have a community, Fab Ventures, run by Odile Rachael, who's ex L'Oreal. L'Oreal actually just put it in their headquarters close by. So depending on what that range, hopefully one of those will help you. But LA is a hotbed of, I would say, different communities. And so as long as, I started here a little over a year ago, as long as you start with one, other people will guide you to others. And that's just all it takes. It's just the one.
So what I'm hearing everyone say is just dive in, build community. It really is everything here in this ecosystem. And I've actually found it to be pretty welcoming, as much as it is it's a financial services world that's tend to be a little dry. Once you find your community, like, it's amazing how supportive. And I mean, I was invited by Adela to this conversation. So this is how it's done. Jessica, looked like you unmuted to add something.
Yeah, just throwing in a few other resources for founders here in LA. There's a few accelerators focused on Black and Brown entrepreneurs. So we have Plug in South LA, which has 2 accelerators a year with, I believe, some funding attached to it now. I'm on the board of that. There's also Grid 110, and they work with Slauson & Co. to do non-dilutive funding for one of their cohorts each year. And then others they just have great resources generally. And an incredible community. There's also Black Ambition, which is Pharrell's accelerator, and they accept over, I think, around 250 entrepreneurs each year and put them through kind of a really intensive program that connects you with lots of mentors and experts, and also a potential for non-dilutive capital at the end as well. I've been a mentor for that for the past 2 years, so since it started. And if you went to a college or a university, they usually have angel groups attached to those. So I know Stanford has Stanford Angels, but I know UCLA has one. I know University of Michigan has one. So each school usually has some type of angel and entrepreneur network that is giving out some type of funding for entrepreneurs associated with those.
Funding and education and group think and all the things we need to build a better, brighter community here. And Adela, IIiana, and Rachael have all added even more resources in the chat. So if you didn't hear it called out, the only one that I see is missing is Gangels. That's another amazing angel network. We haven't talked about that one yet, but I think they're the largest queer investment network in the country, maybe even the world. That's a big one. Thai SoCal, that's another good one too. Let's shift focus a little bit and talk about what's the big misnomers? What is the number one thing that you hear non-investor, non-LP yet people get confused about as it relates to venture? Let's take it back to basics. What are the things you get all the time? You're like, oh honey, no, that's not how it goes. What are the big things that you hear? Anyone want to start?
I guess from the wannabe investors, for instance, Laurel, the 2 key things I hear is, do I need to have a credential to be an investor, to become an investor, right? And do I need
say
to
more about that? What does being credentialed
Yeah.
mean for those that
Exactly.
don't know?
So sometimes you're called to be an accredited investor, for instance, right? And you need to have a certification of sorts. And everybody's like, oh my gosh, does that mean I have to take a course, a training or something? And in many cases, the answer is a no, right? And there are very specific requirements for the venture firm that you're going to be working with or that you're going to be associated with. But if not, then there are just financial requirements actually to be considered an accredited investor. So I think that's a lack of knowledge, just lack of education, right, of the industry. So that's one big one. The other big one that I hear is it's scary. I don't know the language. I don't know how to talk to VC. I don't even know how to talk to startup founder. What if I tell them things that they don't want to hear? And I'm like, well, that's the whole point, right? Especially if you want to become not just an investor, but an advisor. I mean, that's the value of an advisor. Just you tell the founder sometimes what they don't want to hear, but they still need to hear, right? To become better at what they are doing. So those 2 are ones that I hear a lot.
Absolutely. Anthony, go for it.
Yeah, I was just going to say one of the things that I heard a lot early on was that you need an investing track record to become an investor. Like you have to have already invested. And you know how I grew up, there was no way that I would be able to have a track record of investing money that we didn't have, and that's just not true, right? You can get started. You can get involved with accelerators. There's a lot of opportunities, a lot of things folks mentioned here today. You can start to build credibility, expertise, and forge a path in venture without needing to invest, you know, tens or hundreds of thousands of your own money.
Yeah, love that one. Adele, it looked like you had unmuted before. Did something you want to add?
Yeah, I love those 2 points. And I think just sort of the other one that I hear a lot is that, similar to Anthony, if that's not my background, then it's not really an industry for me. So if you haven't been, you know, maybe not investing, but even finance, right? And there are a lot of people, you look at the numbers, look at the funds, and you look at the data, and you know who's actually got like great returns. They're usually individuals, diverse teams, different backgrounds, you know, male and female. And I think that's just something that we have to sort of demystify. Similar to what we talked about earlier is, you know, what does the face of an investor or venture look like? And this is more likely it for the next wave.
Hallelujah. I'm so happy. I'm so happy that we get to have these conversations. We're close to where we need to be, but you're absolutely right. And I love the positive spin, Adela. You're always such a joy. Yeah, I think to your point, it's really important that we get uncomfortable. We have to be uncomfortable in order to grow and evolve. And that's why they call this an access class, not an asset class, right? Like get involved. I don't care if it's $1,000. I don't care if it's sweat equity. I don't care if you just want to be an advisor to an investment or a VC fund. Like just have the conversation and get in the rooms and get uncomfortable. That's when growth happens. And that's really how we're going to scale our change in this category. So I love what everyone has added here. Rachel, you were unmuted. You wanted to add something as well?
So I would say it sort of goes to our point where investment is one key piece, but there's always this assumption that people need to get invested in right now, right? And if we're going to the reality of it, especially with people of color, women of color, we're telling them like, hey, this is, you know, the traditional mentality or the Silicon Valley mentality is like, I'm just going to sell 30 to 40% of my company off. And that's, you know, that's how we start. It's not the same reality. I think a lot of it has to do with and being more capital efficient, demonstrating traction, but there are also non-financial ways of being able to do that. And communities definitely help that. But I think when I talk with people, they're just like, well, they just need to get invested. And I'm like, that's one of many different components to the success of a startup. And so that's one thing I wanted to bring attention to. But I would say that's probably the main one. I know that we have some other questions as well. Well,
actually, that led into perfectly the next question, which is we've talked about the funder side. Now let's talk about the founder side a little bit. You'd mentioned, we talked about track a little bit. You talked about being capital efficient. What other tips and insights does the panel have to share with any startups listening in that will help them fund and or scale their startup faster? This is a question I get a lot, especially because, you know, I think most people that are watching don't realize as VCs, we have to fundraise just like you all do. So we know both sides of this table in a really meaningful way, but let's talk about the founder side and how someone could scale or fundraise in a more efficient way. Adela, go for it.
Yeah, so from the founder perspective, you know, I think it's really important to make sure you know who your audience is, right? And this is just for maybe somebody coming from the perspective of you've just started fundraising, or you're just trying to get out there and build that network. You're trying to connect with investors, or maybe even just get guidance. Really do your homework. There isn't an excuse anymore. We're so privileged, right, to be in this age of technology and have the access that we do. Social media is usually a good thing, but, you know, have it work for you. So really take the time to understand who you're reaching out to and if they're a good fit. And there's nothing wrong with, you know, reaching out to somebody that's not like an ideal fit, but you should know out the gate, like, where are they investing? You know, who are their portfolio companies? What's their background? That'll make for such a better sort of first intro, whether it's cold email or even a warm intro.
Yeah, I think don't waste our time. Like, we're busy like you are, and not to be harsh, but like, I cannot tell you how many companies come to us and I'm like, yo, if you just looked at my website, you would see that I don't invest in you. Like, stop bothering me. No offense, but like, come on. We're all
Yeah.
grown-ups in the room. And also that tells you what kind of a founder you are. You're just like spraying and praying and not actually doing the work to know that we're in the right category for you. Rachel?
Yeah.
So it's fair. I mean, I think pitch decks are a really good example of this in terms of messaging. So when we go to the investment slide of what their ask is, I also tell them what are the top 3 core skill sets or things you need, because it's money and, right? When whomever is going to be your investor is going to be your partner in business. So it should be more than money that's going to come from this person, whether it's their network, their experience, because a lot of them, like you, Laura, I'm sure you'd be like, okay, so how can I help you? That's always a question that comes up. And if the founder says, well, I don't know, I was hoping that you could figure that out for me. Exactly, right? And so my suggestion is make it as easy as possible for people to understand exactly, you know, how you position them or see them as part of your company, if they're going to be your investor, but also exactly what you want from them in terms of, you know, you have a background in sales, a B2B sales. This is exactly what I want to leverage to help us build out our B2B sales team, right? Something really specific. I think the more specific is better. And that sort of helps as well, sort of, you know, separate the wheat from the chaff, but also don't waste people's time.
Yes, you get a gold star, Rachel. I couldn't have said it better. Like, be friggin' specific. If you don't know what you want or what I can do to help you, why the hell should I help you? Like, don't waste my time. Oh, I love that. IIiana, looks like you wanted to add something as well.
Yeah, I just wanted to maybe provide a quick, I love frameworks. So one of the things that I do with Laurel is I tell startup founders, use the KPMC framework. For me, KPMC is to start by knowing yourself, your goals, and how much money you want to fundraise, right? Then go with a P, which is prepare yourself, do your research, do your homework, right? To your point, look at their website, right, of the people that you're trying to connect with. So prepare yourself, prepare your pitch. Then do the matching. So the M stands for matching. Match yourself with those people that are more prone to be aligned with you and with your philosophy, with what you're trying to do. And last but not least, with the C is connect. Finally, you're prepared, you did your research, you get a good matching. Now connect and do the outreach. If you follow that, you're going to have a better chance. It's not going to be a guarantee of success, obviously, or getting the money, but it's going to put you in a better position to actually go and do the process of fundraising well.
100. Anthony?
Yeah, IIiana, I love that. And if I could add one thing, it would be to be relentless, right? Like, it's not easy.
Yes.
And, you know, becoming a successul founder is not easy. Investor is not easy. You just need to stay after it and you know, believe in yourself and not take no, and you will get there. Maybe that sounds a little bit too, you know, that Adela had that more positive spin in the conversation early on. I want to keep it going, but it's real, right? Like, the people who win are the people who just keep going. And that's an attitude I try to have. So, yeah.
I think it's especially important to call that out in this environment. Like, it is a freaking slog out there right now. It is hard on both sides of the table to fundraise as a VC and as a company, as a founder. So I think your point is really well taken. And it's also important that we have honest conversations too. Like, I put a story up on my IG, I think it was Friday, and I was like, look, like, I had a couple bad days this week. I got a lot of no's and it bothered me, and that's okay too. Like, I feel like because we are, you know, diverse leaders in a very non-diverse space, sometimes we feel like we have to like puff our chest and be perfect all the time. And I just want everyone to know this is a hard game on both sides of the table. It's okay not to be perfect. And in fact, I find that when I'm vulnerable with my LPs and with my founders is when the real connections are made and when real honesty and real partnership comes about. So Anthony, I really appreciate you calling that out. We do finally have a question from the audience. Now you're getting involved. And we've been given a little extra runway because we're having such a great conversation. So we're going to run a couple extra minutes. Carla asks, if a founder partnered with the wrong VC, what is the best way to end the relationship? Ooh, this is a hot one. Who's got a good answer to that? I'm still new, so we've only deployed a little bit of capital, so I don't have a specific perfect answer to that. Has anyone on panel come across this as an issue?
So I've seen things, I would say I've seen things, but I haven't experienced them myself. So that's the only thing I can position if we do answer this question. And I'm going to answer it as a lawyer. It depends. It really depends. It's like anything else. Depends what kind of your pre-existing relationship is. Is it affable? Is it not? Have you been able to demonstrate and have tractionable growth? You know, what's this particular reason why? There's no cookie cutter version of this. And so This is where I would say I would advise, there's definitely lawyers that specialize in this. So if that's something that you need help with, definitely I feel like this group can help. But there's no best way. I'm just going to put it out there. There's definitely but I would say ways that can be affable if you message and work through accordingly. But you know, we don't know if the relationship is sour or if you guys are just starting your relationship, right?
Yeah.
I think maybe this goes back to something, if I may, that IIiana said, which is doing your homework, right? Like the better you do your homework, the more likely you are to avoid, you know, partnering with someone that's not a fit. So homework is key.
That's fair.
Yeah.
Also, as a lawyer, Rachel, I didn't realize you were one as well. I'm reformed myself. Oh, Anthony, you too? Oh God, I feel so bad for everyone. No,
Don't go to law school can be the takeaway from this panel.
There you go.
Kidding.
Don't go to law school.
Kidding.
But
Kidding.
I would say, I would add to this, like, as if things are starting to sour, make sure that you keep a paper trail of everything. Like, I think that's going to be the most valuable resource. Like, try not to take phone calls unless they're recorded, and on both sides, like Zooms that are recorded on both sides. Make sure you have a paper trail and emails so that if it does go really, really sour and ends up being litigious, that you can back up your side of it. But I think to Rachel's point, you know, there's so many factors here. Set yourself up first for success and make sure you have an exit clause in your LP agreements, right? Or in your investor agreements, right? So that if something goes wrong, but you're still performing and it's just that they're having a cash issue or they, you know, I don't know, there's a million things. Someone dies and they need to do X, Y, and Z. There's so many factors that could happen here. Just keep your side of the street clean. That's what I would say.
You can bring in a mediator if you need to as well.
There you
I was
go.
going to comment that we haven't had any issues, but you know, certainly hear about other founders and funders, and you bring in a mediator. And Laurel is spot on. You know, it's a business engagement. It's a contract. So before you get into anything with whoever that is, a close person who's an investor or a formal VC, just make sure you've got your legal really, really buttoned up. It's going to be good for you today and down in the future.
Yeah. Don't be penny wise and pound foolish, right?
Mm-hmm.
Well, no. So, okay, Carla just followed up. Buying out is an option. That is possible. I have heard of people buying back shares to different partners. It's definitely a possibility, but we can't tell you as a group if it's the best option for you.
Yeah, we always recommend with our founders to go through legal and talk to a lawyer, but definitely make sure your terms are very clear. Make sure that you revise the terms, like you have as much power there as well as the investor, and also reach out to, if you have a board, to your board. That's what they're there for. And if you don't have a board yet, maybe you only have an advisory board. That's a great time to like lean into the advisory board, or maybe the lead investor as well. Someone that you can trust and talk through different options with them. They should be able to support you through the process.
Yeah, fantastic addition.
Yeah,
Go ahead, IIiana.
Laurel, maybe one thing I was going to say with this is whenever we start talking about legal things and lawyers, immediately our mindset goes into negative mode, right? It's just the human nature. So I just say, just make sure that if you are in that situation where you are trying to break parts with your VCs or even advisory board members or anything like that, first question is why? Why do you think you want that, right? What is the cost of that? Is there any way to spin it, give it a positive spin in any way, shape, or form to make it a win-win situation where you get what you want out of exiting, but they also get something, right? Because many times we only see it from our side of the street, but there's always the other side. So is there any way to get to a middle ground, to a middle point? So I just say, let's keep that in mind when we go through these negative sort of periods, if we ever get there, right? So hopefully one of you will go into that.
Well, I think, yeah, in this day and age, like everyone is, I say everyone's really clenched right now. Everyone's just kind of like, what's going to happen? Are we going to go into a recession? Are we going to get funding? Like what's happening right now? And so especially in these times, that's when people have a tendency to like pull out of deals, and they just want to hold on to their cash, and they just get scared, right? They're clenched. So there is certainly an energy I find right now of people being very nervous about things because we're just in this weird kind of middle ground. I don't know. Would you all agree with that? What is your feeling in terms of the general sentiment around the world right now?
Well, I think so. If you look at the statistics, right, just last year, 67% decrease in funding in general, right, compared to previous years. 44% of the startups failed last year because of lack of funding. 48% because of they were running out of runway. So yeah, definitely we're still feeling that, right? And that's why it's so important to have a mindset that, to the extent possible, is like, let's really think about this without the emotional part so much, which is super hard because as a startup founder, especially, you're there, right? You're wearing your feelings in your sleeve and it's hard, but to the extent possible, let's try to keep a more neutral mindset when we go through tough situations too.
Yeah, I mean, I'll also say there's a correction that's happening right now that everyone in our world is pretty excited about, right? Like valuations are normalizing. We're not getting these crazy, 20x for a pre-rev company that's not a SaaS, right, company. Like we're actually getting real valuations, discounts, down rounds, things like that. Whereas people were just throwing wild money at wild valuations over the last couple of years, which frankly gave venture a really bad name and shitty returns, let's be honest. So now we have an opportunity for a course correction, and the venture vintage of this year, the next year, these are going to be the ones that are going to crush it for their LPs. So while people are still nervous, like now I say the same thing in the marketing side of the world. Like whenever there's like a recession, people pull their dollars out of marketing, but when there's less people competing for the same amount of space, you're going to be able to capture more market share, capture more equity. Like this is the power pole position. So people should be really excited about what's to come, I think. Anyone else have a perspective? Rachel, go for it.
Yeah, so I think there's a couple of things because, for funds going for investment, yes, I've seen that it's taking longer. A lot of people are keeping their money until probably the second half of the year. So, fall is probably going to be a really interesting time, honestly. I would also say that there is dry powder. So there's money, like VCs that have the money, they have the money. And again, they're just choosing not to deploy until later this year because they also want to see how the market conditions are, unless they're extremely risk loving, which very few are, but I mean, deals are still being made. It's just, again, as you said, it's more in the VC pocket now than it really is for founders.
Yeah. Let's talk about what you're excited about. Like what industries, and everyone, like AI is the big buzzword right now. What is it that everyone's so excited about within your respective theses? And actually, if someone could define, maybe Adela, if I could pass to you, like what is a thesis? Like why do venture funds have theses, and what do they typically look like? And give us a little bit of like kind of baseline on that.
Yeah. And that's a great question. I didn't really understand what that was, until probably just 2 years ago. But it's super crucial because you hear that there are all these funds, but when you actually think about what do they do and where do they focus, like what's their headline, that's going to be their thesis. It might not be, a long sort of one pager. It's usually going to just be a couple sentences. And if you're really prescriptive, maybe like under 50 words even, but it's really talking about like where they focus and maybe even sector, or maybe not if they're not, focusing on just one sector. For me, I would say, personally really excited about everything that's happening in healthcare, especially looking at the US. We need that reform. We need to sort of change the way that consumers have access to healthcare. We need to change the way that diverse groups have access to really good care. So health for me is number one. And not only because our fund is AI focused, but it is going to really transform. It already has, right? It's not new. It's just that now it's new to the consumer. It's been around for decades.
Are you concerned about regulatory? Because that's the big second part of that conversation, right?
Yeah. I'm not too concerned about it. I think we're going to work through. It's going to be sticky, just with like any revolution, right? You don't know what you don't know, and you've got the panic, and you've got these big sort of doom and gloom headlines. But I think at the back end of it, and truly from the foundation, I think it's going to make a huge difference, and I think it's going to help to connect communities who haven't actually ever been seen. So the depth in which we can reach now with the new products and services with AI, I think is going to be huge.
I love it. And thank you for defining thesis. To IIiana's point earlier, it's basically our investment mandate. Like, why are you talking to us? Is this the right fit, right? At its most basic level. And that's another big thing I want to make sure that you all take away. Like, this is not brain surgery, right? It's just jargon. Ask the questions. These are just words you can look up. It's not that deep, and we will explain it all to you if you'd like. What else is everyone on the panel excited about? Like, I will tell you something I'm not excited about. You could also go the other way if you want, like something that you refuse to invest in. Like, I think if one more celebrity comes through with a skincare line, I'm gonna vomit. Like, I cannot. I don't care about your audience that you're a celebrity and you have a skincare line. Like, what other things are you excited or not excited about?
Oh, then Human Plus Capital has some things to talk about, Laurel. So I mean, for me, it's this new guard area of innovators in our space that represent hidden voices with hidden, problems that are now just coming to light. So talking about skincare, maybe you might care about Parallel Health. So what they're using is microbiome testing to personalize your skincare and deliver it through phage therapy. So this is all cutting edge stuff, right? And then that's just it, is we're really testing the boundaries of what has existed before and delivering solutions in a completely new way, of which was not, I would say, supported by the old guard. So that, for in healthcare, that's an example. AI, because that was my world in Accenture. So to Adela's point, it has existed for like over a decade. I worked with it at Accenture, in 2008. I come from it as, I think, especially even in the music scene, where affects someone's identity or their indulgence. So more from a data privacy perspective, I think that's where regulation will grow, because that's where there's some existing regulation currently. And the more that we talk about how people can mimic someone's voice or their songs or their lyrics or how they sound, their impression of an individual, I think that's where a lot of the AI discussions are right now.
Yeah, deepfakes are no joke. They're scary and cool at the same time. It's like that weird double-edged sword. And I do want to caveat, like, yes, there are clearly really interesting things happening in skincare in specific categories. I was just being overly, exaggerating, because it feels like every celebrity has their own skincare or fashion line these days. But what else are we excited about, or what else would we never invest in? I guess never say never, but IIiana?
Well, I'm excited about climate tech, green tech, all those areas. Health tech, to your points, it's exciting too. I think with AI, because I've been in high tech for so long, I'm a little bit proceed with caution type of situation. I know a lot of people are trying to jump in, like full steam ahead. Let's have a lot of FOMO type of situations with AI right now. But it's going to be an exciting market. I think the companies that we're seeing out there right now that are making waves are not necessarily going to be the ones that are going to be surviving in the medium to long term. So that's something that always happens in tech. So I think give it a little bit more, like 3 to 6 months, to really look at those companies. But there's always, of course, that you're missing out on those big unicorns potentially building up to become the AI leaders, right? And the other thing that I'm very excited about is this whole movement of women investors. So there's, I don't know if you guys heard about how Women Invest is the sister company to How Women Lead. And it's pretty amazing what they are trying to do, right? So it's a community of 14,000 women, and that actually lean in on each other for their careers and everything, but now they are converting that into investment power. So they are saying you have all these women, right, that are in their whatever 40s to 50s, they have wealth, they want to invest, and they don't know, again, going back to our earlier point on how to do it. So there's now organizations that are being built up to actually create those channels of investment, which I think that for our group of entrepreneurs, it's going to be fantastic. So I'm really excited about that.
She was just on our podcast last week or the week before. So I love all these connection points. And that's really what happens in this world, right? A couple of things you were saying that I want to break down for the audience. One is unicorn versus stallion. Have you guys heard of this? Like, what's the difference between a unicorn versus a stallion? Does anyone know the answer? So a unicorn is what companies historically wanted to get to hit that $1 billion mark, right? But what we're actually hearing is that the new term is, or the new goal is stallion, because it's actually a real creature and not a fictional character. And stallions are $1 billion companies that are actually profitable. So there's a new term for you. The other one I wanted to break down was, does anyone know what a tourist founder or a tourist funder is? Really important in this market. So I want to give this definition. Rachel, you're giggling. I'm going to call on you.
I'm laughing because it's more just like people who dabble, who say that they are, but they really haven't built or don't continue to build something and launch into market. Similarly, for a funder, I would actually say there's another term associated with tourist funders, and it's also ghost VCs. So
yes.
Yeah, just, people who are stating that they're doing something, but haven't proven that they built, what they stated. So That's why I was laughing, because you do come across quite a bit of them actually.
Oh yeah. I mean, especially in like the big, big markets, LA, New York, Miami, there's a lot of BS out there, frankly. So also be careful. Like there's a cautionary tale. Like make sure you're talking to people who are the real deal. Because there's a lot of people faking the funk out there. I do think that now is the time when we're starting to see this kind of fall apart, right? Like we are not, we're not as, I think, as vulnerable in that world anymore, because people frankly don't have the money to continue faking the funk. They're like, ooh, better go get a W-9 because I can't actually afford this or support this lifestyle anymore. And I'm not making any investments, so I just got to cut bait. And the same thing on the founder side, like they got a lot of money thrown at them. They ran out of runway, or they were not focused on profitability, and now poof, disappeared with your money. Happens all the time. The last question I want to end on, no, I have two more, just kidding. I want to ask, what is your favorite thing when you talk to a founder? Like, what is something that when you talk to a founder and they say X, you're like, oh my God, this person gets it? Or is there one thing or two things, or is it an energy? Like, is it just a vibe check, or is there a specific thing you're looking for, Anthony?
Yeah, I would say it's less about like that thing that they say and more the energy that they say it with. Right? It takes so much to build a successful company. And part of that is being able to rally a team of amazing people around you to do it together. And I think if you can bring that kind of energy to a conversation, like it gets investors excited and, the team that they'll be working with. And I think it gives them a greater likelihood of success. So that energy, that like authentic, you talk about, you mentioned vulnerability, which I did not expect to come up in this conversation, but I love that it did. Super important. And right, so someone who can bring that vulnerability and authentic energy, to me, it's, you can't match that. So yeah, that's what I'd say.
Love that. Anyone else? Like, what gets you excited about a founder when you're on a call? When you walk away and you're like, hell yeah, that was awesome.
I think go for it.
All right, no, just a quick thing for me. It's two questions I usually ask them is about their personal values, because I know that's going to drive the whole thing. And sometimes you can even just from there know if they are going to be successful or not, or they are going to have a harder chance about that. And the second one is, what are their non-negotiables? Because that will also
like dating.
What's that?
Like dating.
Like dating, right, exactly. So see, this is like a relationship too, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, I think those two questions are critical. They gave me excited because hearing the answers, it's always super eye-opening for me. And it gives you a view or a perspective on the founder that's different from talking about the business or the idea or the fundraising or the next round or anything like that. And it turns the conversation into something different. And sometimes actually it gives them some additional tools for them to evaluate what they are doing and why they are approaching things in the way they are approaching them. So it's pretty eye-opening on both sides. So it's exciting.
I agree. Jessica.
Yeah, I think we're investing in early stage at New Media Ventures. So for me, it's really the why. If there's, what's the clear, if they're able to communicate clearly, like their connection to the problem or the solution, why they're doing this, why they're building, why they're spending their entire life right now working on this thing, that really gets me excited. I think also to add on to Anthony's point, there's vulnerability, but also transparency. What doesn't get me excited is when a founder at an early stage tries to make it seem like everything's perfect, because I know that it's not, having talked to so many founders. And so I do appreciate like transparency around what they built, where they are, like what challenges they're facing, because that tells me a little bit about what our relationship as a founder and funder will be like. And finally, for me, because we are impact investors, I do care about the impact side. So if they're able to like really articulate how what they're working on relates to our thesis, our impact thesis around power building, it tells me that you've done the research, but also gets me really excited for the impact that we'll be able to create.
Love it. Well, we are perfectly on time to pass it back to Mario. What a fantastic conversation. Thank you so much for being vulnerable, being excited about what we're building, and frankly, just making change. I always say when I close out my conversations with my team, go forth, be fabulous, and make change possible. Thank you to everyone who joined.
Everybody, thank you again. Let's give them a round of applause. I thank you guys for being part of this startup panel. It's really amazing. An amazing amount of information to take in kind of after Tech Week LA. So it's just kind of traveling back in time a little bit to that. So really amazing. Thank you guys for this panel, and hopefully we can continue the conversation on our future podcasts. Thank you guys. Bye-bye.